What's up, guys? This is going to be my 2022 World Championship tier list. I do this every year. This tier list is actually going to be a collaborative effort between me and ForestWithin. I've done the top 16 teams, but for some of the minor regions that I don't actually watch, I defer to Forest. If you guys don't know him, he is a former Challenger Kindred main that now is a degenerate gambler. He bets on all these regions, so he actually watches a lot of the regions. Just for the record, this matters left to right, so left to right is actually order, so you can view this as like 1 to 24. I forget how many teams are here. I think Istanbul Wildcats didn't even make the cut on this tier list that I'm using, but either way, they're going to be in the F tier. You know, I'm going to change this right now. F tier. Let's get right into it. So the number one team that I have going into Worlds, this is going to be different than most people. Most people think that Gen G is the number one team going into Worlds, but I am an LPL enthusiast, and I really like JDG. I think that the way that they play is going to be pretty hard for other teams to adapt to. They play pretty fast. I think all the Chinese teams play a lot faster than people expect. I think that Gen G has played really well in stable games, and in Korea, the only team that actually was playing fast into them was Sandbox, and I think that they might be caught off guard by the amount of plays and the amount of action that occurs in a lot of these LPL games. Outside of them just like winning LPL and being the best LPL team, I think that they are a team that has the ability to play from ahead and behind, which is a very important skill when it comes to Worlds. When you play in Worlds, it's very hard for, you know, a tournament that's going to last over a month to be in form and play consistently well all the time. I mean, you can play at a certain level, but you're going to have certain games where you're off. You're going to have certain series where you don't play well. And this is not a double elimination tournament. You have to be there every single time. And the thing that I like about JDG is they always battle back whenever they're behind in games. And I don't see that out of a lot of other teams around the world. And I think that the ability to just be a solid team, but also have that other gear where you always have practice ways to get back into these games. It's not just you waiting for the enemy team to make a mistake. It's actually trying to create windows that you can capitalize on later in the game. So when you're behind, creating pockets of vision, you know, trying to get TP advantages, dropping lanes and playing on 2 lanes instead of 3 lanes in order to get a pick. I think all that stuff is really valuable. And that's how you can actually come back in games when you're behind. And the fact that JDG do that so well, I think is a skill in and of itself. It sounds weird to be like, oh, they come back well, because in theory, the only way that you can come back in League of Legends is if the enemy team makes a mistake. But guess what, man? All the teams around the entire world make mistakes. So having the ability to capitalize on those mistakes and actually set up situations that will allow you to have the potential to capitalize on the mistakes, very important to me in World Championships. But second, I do have Gen G. I think Gen G is extremely solid. The meta right now is a mid-bot meta. It's mainly just a bot lane meta, but sometimes mid moves to bot. And it's important to have prio in that lane. Going into Worlds, we've heard a couple different things. Some people think that it's going to be a top meta. I know Dune on his stream was talking about how the game would be a top meta, and I think that a top-centric meta would actually hurt Gen G. When you think of Gen G, their strongest players right now are Ruler and Chovy. Just their laning is impeccable, and then Peanut has been everywhere where he needs to be. I think that the weakest player on Gen G's team, and I don't think that this would come as a shock to people, is Doran. I think Doran is solid. He's fine. He could play the tanks. He can play, you know, Renekton and Aatrox, and he could do what the team needs. But I don't view him the same way that I view 369, where when I see 369 play those champions, it really looks like he's like coming for people's heads with his picks, and it seems like Doran is like the guy that's trying to not ruin the game for Chovy and Ruler. And I do think that if teams play fast into Gen G might not respond to it super well. I mean, Gen G is the type of team that will give up objectives. They'll give up a Drake to potentially cross map top lane, or just give it up to just wait to a better time to scale into fights. And I think that if you have that approach versus LPL teams, it could be hard. That being said, I do think that they are the second best team in the tournament. I think if JDG don't win, I think Gen G could definitely win. And essentially the way that I'm going to be doing this tier list is that in the S tier, these are going to be teams that I think like are huge favorites to win. Like, I would not expect anyone outside of S or A to even have the potential chance of winning Worlds. I think it wouldn't even happen, which, hey, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe we'll get a massive upset. But I think that S and A here are just the teams that have the ability to win Worlds. So my next team that is also going into S tier is the early game Kings Top Esports. Now, Top Esports, people are going to be really low on because they saw Jackie Love in super hard in the LPL finals. He's the type of guy that can win or lose you a game pretty easily. And he has been more consistent overall this year. It just so happens that in the most crucial moment, he played his worst matches. It's definitely tough. It's definitely something that counts against top esports. And if you look at top esports for the history of this entire year, they've had problems closing out games. They consistently get early game leads because they have the best jungler in the world right now on their team in Tien, the fucking GOAT. That's my boy. So they do just have like really good early games. They get big leads, but they have a problem closing out. They have an undeniable problem closing out games, and that's worrying. Now, they still are good. They got second in LPL. They went 2-3 two times versus JDG. They were very close to winning those series. They're able to dispatch EDG 3-0 when they played against them. So I don't think that Top Esports is a bad team. I think that people that only watch finals might think that they're more flawed than they actually are. They definitely have flaws, but I think the flaws are overblown. So I also have them in S tier. I think they are a top tier team. So next I have EDG. EDG. They are the Korean team of the LPL. Super stable team. We've been in a bot-centric meta for a while now. I'm not sure if this is going to continue. I think that if the meta changes and we no longer are playing bot side in these games, or the games are no longer just being played primarily around bot side, I think that Genji and EDG both get hurt because of this, because they have the two best AD carries in the world. You have Ruler, obviously, for Genji, and you have Viper for EDG, and Viper is just an absolute beast. He's as close to a perfect AD carry as I've found, and he's the only AD carry in the world that was able to play in playoffs like all of the AD carries. Like, he could play the Draven, the Lucian, the Zeri, Sivir. He could play everything, Kalista, and then outside of that, like, this guy is just solid on all the unique picks. So if there's a time where it calls for a Zyrakan, I would expect Viper to crush on all these picks. So we'll see. We might end up in a slightly different meta. Maybe Kai'Sa ends up coming back because of the buffs, and that changes things up. But I really respect Viper. He's one of the best players in the world to me. He might be the best player in the world to me. And I think that he is one of the most clutch carries that you can have on your team. And the person that kind of gets forgotten here is Scout. Scout's a monster. Scout is really good. Maybe you could argue that Chovy's better than him. Outside of that, I mean, he can go head to head with all these guys. He can go head to head with Knight. He can go head to head with Yagao. He's an insane player, super underrated, and you don't want to sleep on this team. This is the former world champions. This is the defending world champions going into this tournament. They won the last one with the same lineup. Do not sleep on this team. EDG can win. They can win. Under them, I am going to do something slightly controversial. Actually, I don't even know if this is controversial, because one thing that I actually do is I look at like my picks compared to like betting site favorites, because I feel like those are like pretty accurate tier lists generally of how teams are expected to do. And this is something that I've seen on a bunch of them, is that RNG is actually above T1, which I'm going to do here. So essentially the way that those look for people that actually just care about, you know, odds and random like that, is that Genji is first, and then you have 4 Chinese teams, 2 through 5. I'm aligned with this. I think that RNG is a A-tier team. I think this team is very good. They don't match up well into EDG. They played against EDG twice, so people are going to be, you know, seeing how those matchups work. And I think that the issue with their matchup into EDG specifically is that Viper is just better in lane than Gala. Gala and Ming, the way they've always existed is they were able to, you know, do fine with weak lanes, and then they were able to just roam Ming around the map, and then Gala was able to really just be stable, and then when team fights came, he would take over. That's not really that easy to do when you're playing against things like Lucian Nami every game, where you have to worry about Draven and all these power picks. So I think that could be an issue when you see RNG match up into Genji. I think that's not a good matchup for RNG. I think RNG into EDG is not a good matchup for them either. Outside of those two teams, I think everyone else, they actually have a pretty good matchup into at Worlds. So we'll have to see how this ends up panning out. But RNG is a team I respect. I hope that they play more around top lane, because I really still believe that Breathe is a monster. People that only watched LPL recently probably haven't got to see how good Breathe can be. I mean, there was that Fiora game 5 versus LNG, where he was able to pop off, but this guy was a premier carry top laner in LPL for the longest time. He played on WE. He was one of the main carries on WE. He could play the Camille. He could play the Fiora. He could play the Kali. He plays all those unique champions, all those skill-based champions top lane, and he's one of the best in the world at it. So I hope that they unleash him more. I hope that because of their loss in playoffs, they're able to really reassess what their strengths are, because when you unleash Breathe, this guy can be one of the best players in the world. And if we're in a top carry meta, he's one of the best players to have on your team. If we get into a true top carry meta, I mean, who do you want on your team? You want Zeus on your team. You want Breathe on your team. That's probably it. Those are probably the 2 best players to have on your team in this type of situation, if we do end up in a top centric meta. So RNG is my A tier second team here. All right, next up, T1. T1 is an interesting team. I think that T1 had a really bad read on the meta in playoffs. I didn't like the way that they had Zeus weak siding pretty much every single game. I mean, he played like the odd game. I think he played like one game into Bertol when they played against Damwon, where he was playing some carries, but he's playing essentially only weak side top laners. And this guy is, for me, the best player on T1. So I would like to see them play towards Zeus more. I think that this guy is really insane. So I think T1, it's really hard to assess where they'll end up being. Obviously, they did lose to RNG at MSI, but a lot has changed since then. And I think that T1 is in worse form now because they don't really identify their own strengths super well. And their drafts are, I mean, they like lose draft almost every single game. Now, I don't really know if that's because they're just bad at drafting or they just don't play the champions that allow them to have great drafts well enough that they're confident on it. But that being said, I don't think that T1 is in like the best form that we've seen. I mean, I could actually see T1 dropping even further. I mean, a lot of these teams could drop. I think the A tier, you could see big fluctuations in performance from EDG, RNG, and T1, which is why I have them a level under S, a level under these S tier teams, where you really just believe that these teams are going to be like huge favorites for at least semifinals. But yeah, we'll have to see if T1 actually end up adapting. Next up, we've got my favorite team from Korea, Damwon, another team that could end up having the meta swing into their favor. Nuguri obviously has been sharing time with Bertol in the top lane. Not really sure about that because it seems really strange when they sub players. To me, it's like Nuguri is playing a really good game and then he just gets subbed out of nowhere. So I think that this team has not looked the same all year long, but they do have the ability to perform. I think that their matchups could have been better. Like if they ended up getting to play against Genji, that's actually one of the matchups that has been decent for Damwon. Like out of all the teams in Korea, it seems like Genji is actually the most afraid of Damwon. They just don't like the matchup that much into Damwon. So I really hope that we get to see Canyon and Showmaker in form. I mean, Canyon's my favorite player in all of the LCK. So I hope that he shows up and he's able to really do things. You know, maybe play some Hecarim, which is super OP right now, in my opinion. We'll see what the nerfs are before Worlds, but I'm pretty sure that champion will still be relevant, even if they nerf him the way that they say they're nerfing him. Some like Q stack nerfs, some light damage nerfs. I mean, this champion is just insane, and Canyon was always good at it. So hopefully we get to see a strong version of Damwon at Worlds. That is going to be my S, my A, and my B tier. Now, this is going to be a little weird because I only have one team in B tier, but I do think that this, for me, this is how I perceive the tournament to look. I think that there's going to actually be a break between S, A, B, and then like C tier, I think is a level below. So not only is it just like breaks in between S, A, and B, I would say that there's another like skill difference between Damwon and the next team that I have, which is Rogue. Rogue from EU. I mean, they did it. I know it's tough to believe in Rogue, but they overcame their demons. They were able to win a championship in Europe, and I think that they're playing pretty well together. I really like the dynamic of their bot lane. I think their bot lane could be a significant point of strength throughout this tournament when you see how their bot lane matches up into other people that they're playing into. I think that this could be a good tournament for Rogue. Also, I think they got a decently easy group. This doesn't really factor into these power rankings, but I mean, if I was looking at it just right off the bat, these are the teams that I think will end up going through group stage here. These are the 8 teams that I believe are going to be going through the group stage. Fortunately, I don't believe any of the playing teams are going to make that much noise. All right, so we've got a couple teams left. All right, so we have Cloud9 here. Now, Cloud9 has a pretty hard group, right? They've got 2 A tier teams in their group. They've got EDG and T1. So I'm not sure if they're actually going to be able to show their strength. That being said, I do like their matchup into EDG. I've said this before on a couple different podcasts, where I like the fact that Fudge has the capability to play all the carry matchups. He can kind of be a Breathe-esque player into Flandre, and Flandre is definitely the weak side top of EDG. He's just not super good on the mechanical champions. Now he's a lot better on, you know, Aatrox, Renekton, all those picks than, you know, probably anyone that we'll see in North America, but I think that Fudge might be able to get an advantage here. The thing that I'm most worried about for Cloud9 is their mid jungle. I think that into T1, they match up pretty poorly because Jensen himself is kind of like just going even in mid. He's playing to scale in mid. And when you compare that to, you know, some of the other players like Faker, for example, who's in his group, Faker's going to be able to roam. Faker loves to roam right now. Like, Faker is no longer the guy who's going to walk into lane and just you and try to go up a million CS. Like, he's going to work with owner, he's going to dive side lanes, and I think that that's going to actually be possible into C9. But the EDG matchup might be winnable. Maybe EDG loses a game to Cloud9. Cloud9 could force a tiebreak. I think Cloud9 is a pretty strong team. They're probably the strongest team that we've sent from North America to one of these tournaments, at least for me, in the last 3 years, since probably 2018. I just don't think that there's big holes in Cloud9's gameplay. Like, sure, they don't do things perfectly, but they have 5 really good players. They have 5 good mechanical players that can compete against Asian players. Now, they're not going to have an advantage the same way they did in North America, but at least having that, I think, is the baseline that you need to be able to go international and compete. And to me, they've got a solid baseline. You know, they can play a lot of different champions. There's a lot of different strategies that are going to be at their disposal because they have a lot of solid players, and they have versatility. So hopefully we get to see a decent showing out of NA. They might not make it out of groups, but I hope that they're able to at least take a game off either EDG or T1, potentially force the tiebreak, lose it in typical North American fashion, but show the promise. You know, I want to see NA actually do something at this Worlds. All right, next team in C tier, DRX. I'm not that much of a DRX enjoyer. They play slow. It just feels like this team has a lot of holes. I mean, they still have good players. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I still definitely respect Deft. He always manages to make it to these World Championships. But to me, they just don't have anything that's special about them. I think they're the weakest team significantly coming out of Asia. I didn't even think that they were going to make it to this tournament, to be honest. I was selfishly hoping that Sandbox get to show up at this tournament because Sandbox is probably the most fun team to watch from Korea. I mean, they play like complete psychopaths. They remind me of an LPL team. Now, they definitely take a lot of bad fights. You know, it is what it is. They take some terrible fights. But that being said, like, they at least have that spirit where they don't want to give things up. And I think that in general, Sandbox has just made Korea more fun to watch, this split specifically. So I was hoping the Sandbox made it instead of DRX. Maybe I'm just salty that DRX knocked out Sandbox, but I just don't see anything that's like special about DRX. When I watch DRX, I'm like, they're pretty good. Are they special? No. Do they have like a super high ceiling? I don't think so either. Maybe they make it out of groups. Like, I think that they're close to the same skill level as Rogue. I hope that we don't get only Asian teams out of groups, but even if that happens, like, I don't think DRX will make it past quarters. I think that they're like hard capped there. Next team up is G2. They're a team that could benefit from meta changes. Right now, I think that they were exposed pretty hard in finals. They're just a team that has issues with playing around bot side. So if you leave up like carry versus carry bot lane matchups, I don't think that that's good for G2. So they're going to have to try to find band-aid fixes, to the bot lane. Are they going to be able to run Senna Seraphine? Probably not. I assume that that's going to be banned a lot. Also, their group is fucking hard. Like, let's just say that as well. Their group is actually fucking hard. They've got what, JDG Damwon. So I think it's going to be tough for them to get out of groups. They definitely have flaws. They have potential strengths as well. They just don't look complete enough to me to be able to contend with the teams above them. So yeah, I mean, I would love to actually see a best of 5 between Cloud9 and G2. I think that'd be really hype for Western fans. But luckily for us, we've got this Worlds format where you only get to see teams play against teams that are better than them in group stage. You don't really get to see the war in between similarly skilled teams. So unlucky on that front, but yeah, I'm not expecting G2 to make it out of groups at this point. All right, that's it for C tier. Those are my 4 teams for C tier. Next up, we have got Fnatic. Now, Fnatic is super uncoordinated. They look like they play with no comms. That being said, their players are pretty strong, so maybe you can get individual performances out of them that, you know, will elevate them past this D tier ranking that I have, but I just don't have much hope for this team. I think that if they go into Group A, which is the most likely group for them to go into, they're probably going to have a tough time. They're probably going to be last in that group. I think they'll make it out of play-ins. I don't think they'll do much after that. There's just a lot of coordination issues on that team. It literally looks like they play with their mics muted. It looks like a solo queue game because you'll see fights where some people are going in, some people are running out. Hilly's trying to engage on Lulu. Like, the team goes forward when they should be trying to run away. It seems really weird that the team comes to the decisions they come to. So I'm not super hyped on Fnatic. I don't think they'll do much of this World Championship besides for get out of play-ins. Okay, next up, 100 Thieves, 100 Sins. Another team that is super flawed. This is interchangeable, to be honest. I could see 100 Thieves over Fnatic. This could work. This could work. Doesn't really matter. We're not going to be able to see them play against each other anyway. I think that in their groups, neither of them is actually going to do much. 100 Thieves got exposed in finals similarly to G2. They're a weird team. And unless the jungle meta drastically changes and Closer is really able to carry and be the best player on this team, I don't have much hope for 100 Thieves. I think that they're way too limited and the meta doesn't suit them well at all. And also Abadage, who had been playing really well earlier, kind of had a bad finals weekend in general. So that makes me a little bit worried about him playing under the pressure, you know, going to Worlds, playing under significant amounts of pressure. You know, in arenas, I mean, when 100 Thieves ended up winning that championship, it was just in the LCS studio. So I'm not sure if he's going to be comfortable in front of arenas. People will bring up the fact that like when he was 18 or something in Turkey, he played in front of an arena, but that's different than playing against like a top team in an arena. So we'll have to see on 100 Thieves. I'm not sold on them. I hope this is the last that we see of this iteration of it. I think the lineup is hard capped. But that being said, they did end up getting second seed from NA. They did end up making it to Worlds. So they've been good for a while. I just don't think that this team is going to do much better than they already have. I think that they are, yeah, towards the end of their run together. All right, next up, the Mad Lions. The Mad Lions. So the reason why Mad Lions is here is because we're not playing best of fives, guys. We are only playing best of ones. So, you know, hopefully they win their best of ones and they're able to get first and they don't have to play best of five. Jokes aside, Mad Lions is okay. They're an okay team. They do some things really well. They do things really poorly. I think Armut's obviously a liability. He didn't show up in playoffs when it mattered. That being said, I mean, we are in a Renekton Narn meta, so maybe it's going to be better for him. And he was pretty clutch at last year's Worlds. But yeah, I'm not super hyped on Mad Lions. I just think that they're pretty limited. They didn't have enough time with Niski to like really figure out their problems, and I feel like they're kind of slumping at the wrong time. All right, not much to say there. I'm not expecting most of these teams to do anything. Next, you have EG with Cowrie. I know you can't really see it. I mean, I could turn off my dark mode, but then we'd all go blind. So I will just not do that. Anyways, I got EG here. Yeah, I mean, they're decent. They have obviously coordination issues. They have champion pool issues. And they're missing their AD carry. Also, Lucianami is getting nerfed, which is all that we've really seen Cowrie play and do well on. It's very hard to predict how this team will do. But if I had to guess, probably don't think this team is going to make it out of play-ins. I would expect that Mad Lions will make it over them. It'll be close. I think this is extremely close. But for right now, I'm going to have Mad Lions above them. This is my top 15. So now is where we defer to ForestWithin. Okay. What's the first thing we can go with? So the first thing that we could do is we could put both VCS teams into D tier. He actually believes the VCS teams are essentially mini LPL teams. They play really flippy, good mechanics, really, really bad macro. But the teams, he thinks that both of these teams are actually better than Flying Oyster, which I thought was surprising. From watching the region, his mentality is that PSG from last Worlds was pretty much like the peak of PCS. And now without Maple, without River on that team, and like they ended up falling off. And, you know, this CFO team is essentially just a bunch of players that played at Worlds in 2020. So they're not a team that has really like, they're not new players. They're not like hype talents. We've kind of seen them all before. They work decently together and apparently they shit on their region. But that being said, we shouldn't expect them to do too much at this World Championship. So they're going to be the first team in F tier. Now, second team in F tier is Beyond Gaming. These are not my words. I did not watch them play, but Forest says that they suck and will not make it out of play-ins. So, hey, take that for what it's worth. Those are his words. But yeah, he thinks that this team is extremely limited and they're just a weaker version of themselves last year. So those will be the first two teams in F tier. Now, the rest of the teams are completely interchangeable. There's also Istanbul Wildcats, but they all pretty much slot into F tier. This is like pretty much, from his opinion, a coin flip. You could put them in pretty much any order you want. But if I had to guess based off history, I'd probably do something like that. The Japanese teams have been okay. I mean, we had a Japanese team make it out of groups, but now there's no longer Aria on Dead Nation Focus Me to carry them. So Dead Nation Focus Me, I'm going to still put above the Brazilian team, above the Latin American team, and above the OCE team, just based on what I've seen historically, not off anything that I've seen the split. But that's what I'm going to do based off seeing, you know, a bunch of these teams compete at World Championships and MSIs and things like that. So that is going to be the tier list, boys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. This is going to be the last piece of content for a few days on this channel because, I mean, my editor is taking a little bit of a break between worlds, before worlds. So hopefully you guys come back and you'll watch the content that we put up. We'll do a player ranking before worlds, and we'll do a little bit of content on stream as well. But this will be my Worlds 2022 tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoy the small break. And yeah, we are going to be hitting the ground running when Worlds happens. We'll have some announcements to make, and we will just be grinding Worlds content just like we did with playoffs, and try to give you guys the best co-stream / live viewing possible. See you guys then. Peace.